Okay, so systems thinking. It's one of those things you hear everywhere now, right?
Yeah.
Especially in design. But is it just a buzzword or is there something more?
I think that's what we're diving into today, right?
Exactly.
Yeah.
We're looking at this article from the UX Collective. Is systems thinking the new buzzword in UX? And I got to say, it really has me thinking. Like, it pushes us to get comfortable with the uncomfortable.
See, and that's the core of it, isn't it? Systems thinking. It's about looking beyond just the immediate problem and seeing the bigger picture,
Yeah.
even when it's messy,
Right.
complicated.
And it's not even a new idea, which I found fascinating.
No, not at all. In fact, the article even mentions Aristotle was onto this ages ago.
Oh yeah, the whole is greater than the sum of its parts.
Exactly. You can't just look at the individual pieces in isolation. You have to see how they all connect and interact.
So how does that actually work in practice? Like, what's a concrete example?
Okay, imagine baking a cake, right?
Mhm.
You need more than just the ingredients. You need the right amounts, the oven temperature, how long you bake it for. It's all connected.
Exactly. Each part impacts the others. Systems thinking is about seeing those interactions, the feedback loops that create the final result, the whole system.
So it's like instead of just focusing on, say, the flour, you're thinking about how it interacts with the eggs, the sugar, even the heat of the oven to get that perfect cake.
Exactly. And to bring it back to design, the article uses a great example of like designing an app for a medical device.
Okay, walk me through that.
So let's say you're focused purely on the app itself, right? You're just thinking about making it user-friendly for the doctor. But what about the nurses who use it too? The hospital systems, the patient's insurance that even makes the device possible in the first place. It's all a system.
So it's not just about a better product, it's about the entire context that product exists in.
Exactly. And that's where things get really interesting because the article even suggests that this kind of thinking, systems thinking, could be how we tackle huge problems like poverty or climate change.
It's like those, what are they called, wicked problems? Yes. The ones with no easy answers. And this is where Donella Meadows' work comes in, specifically her ideas on leverage points. She said that within any system, there are these points where even a small change can snowball into a huge impact.
So leverage points are like those strategic spots where we can get the most bang for our buck, so to speak. So what's the biggest leverage point for something as massive as climate change?
Well, Meadows argued it was our paradigms.
Paradigm. So we're talking about changing how we see the entire world, not just swapping out a light bulb.
Exactly. Paradigms are those deeply held beliefs about how the world works. Like, they're the lens we see everything through. And sometimes that lens can actually prevent us from seeing the full picture, or even recognizing obvious solutions.
Can you give me an example of a paradigm shift, like something that totally changed how people saw things?
Well, think about Galileo. He challenged the idea that the Earth was the center of everything. He said, no, the Earth revolves around the sun.
And we know how well that went down back then.
Right.
Challenging the status quo, even with evidence, can be risky. But his ideas revolutionize science.
Absolutely. That's the power of a true paradigm shift. It completely changes our understanding and opens up new possibilities.
There's already so much to unpack here, and I feel like we're just getting started.
Oh, we are just scratching the surface. Because the real question becomes, what paradigms are we holding on to today that might be blinding us to the solutions for the huge problems we're facing?
And how do we even identify those beliefs, those paradigms that are so deeply ingrained we don't even realize they're there?
Such good questions. And luckily, Bausson gives us some clues on how to start grappling with those.
Okay, well, let's unpack those then.
So you're asking about uncovering those hidden paradigms, right? It's like detective work, looking for clues in our own thinking.
Okay, I'm game. What kind of clues are we talking about here?
Well, Bauzon brings up Thomas Kuhn, who studied those big scientific revolutions. He said paradigms are like the operating system of our minds. Yeah, they shape how we see the world, what questions even occur to us, the solutions we can imagine.
Like how, for the longest time, everyone just assumed the Earth was flat. It wasn't until someone dared to question that, to actually look for evidence, that things shifted.
Exactly. And those shifts are rarely easy. Kuhn found that people often cling to the old way of seeing things, even when there's proof they're wrong. Like, we'd rather a comfy lie than an uncomfortable truth.
Which, I get it. If your whole worldview is built on something, questioning that can feel like your world's falling apart.
Absolutely. And remember what you were saying about Donella Meadows? These paradigms, they're not just facts and figures, they're emotional, they're cultural, they're tied into our sense of self, our tribe.
So it's not just about changing your mind, it's about maybe changing your whole understanding of who you are in the world. No wonder it's so hard. But if these paradigm shifts are so crucial, especially for these huge problems we're talking about, How do we make them happen? How do we break free?
It starts with awareness. Bauzon says we have to become conscious of the paradigms that are already running the show, so to speak. What assumptions are we making? What are we clinging to, even if it's not really working for us, for the world?
So it's like holding up a mirror to our own thinking. Why do we see things the way we do? But this can't just be about individual reflection, right? We're talking about shifting things on a societal level.
You got it. And this is where things get really interesting. Bauzon argues that designers have a special role in this whole process.
Designers, I mean, we make things, but changing the world.
Think about it. Designers are trained to empathize, to really get inside the heads of the people they're designing for. And they're trained to think systematically, to see the connections, the possibilities others might miss.
So we can use those design skills to, like, design better systems.
Exactly. Bauzon says designers can use their skills to help people actually see the systems they're in, to understand their impact, to even imagine new ways of being.
So less about designing a better chair, more about a better world to put that chair in.
You got it. And it starts with each of us being more aware of those paradigms running in the background, asking the tough questions, challenging the status quo, getting uncomfortable.
Which is both daunting and exciting, honestly.
Okay.
But how do we do that? Where do we even begin?
Well, the article actually offers some concrete things we can try, both as individuals and together.
Okay, let's get into that then. Okay, so we've covered a lot of ground here. We've talked about how powerful paradigms are, how they shape our world, but also how shifting them can feel like, I don't know, moving mountains.
It's a big task, for sure.
It is. So how do we actually start chipping away at those mountains? What are the actual tools, the strategies to make that kind of change happen?
Well, it's like that old saying, right? A journey of 1,000 miles begins with a single step. And I think Bauzon reminds us that we don't need to have all the answers right away. The first step is just noticing, becoming aware of the paradigms that are already running the show in our own minds.
Okay, so self-reflection. Taking a step back and asking, what am I assuming here? What are the unquestioned truths I'm operating from?
Exactly. And it's not even just identifying them, but like, where did they come from? Are these beliefs from your own experience, from your culture, stuff you were taught growing up?
It's like becoming aware of those invisible scripts that are always running in the background, those default settings that affect how we see everything.
Yes. And once you see those scripts, you can start to question them. Are they even still working for you? Do they match the world you actually want to live in? If not, well, maybe it's time to rewrite them.
Okay, I love that. It's like we can be the authors of our own paradigm, choose the lens we're looking through. But how do we go from this individual reflection to actual large-scale change? Shifting those big collective paradigms embedded in our systems.
Bauzon suggests we start by, well, using our voices, our actions, to challenge the status quo, having those conversations that maybe feel a bit risky, questioning why things are the way they are, and then proposing other ways to be.
So it's not enough to just think differently. We have to act differently, too. Have the courage to actually speak up, even when it's uncomfortable.
Yeah. And it's not about being perfect or knowing everything. It's more about being willing to just try things, to experiment, to even mess up sometimes and learn from it.
It's like embracing curiosity, that willingness to keep learning and growing, to see challenges as opportunities for something new.
Exactly. And these paradigm shifts, they rarely happen overnight. It's a process. It takes time. But like Bauzon said, even small changes, they ripple out.
So even if we can't single-handedly fix everything, our choices, our words, they all contribute to a larger shift.
Absolutely. And the more we embrace this way of thinking, the systems thinking, questioning our assumptions, challenging how things have always been done, the closer we get to a better world. More just, equitable, sustainable.
So as we wrap up this deep dive, it seems like the biggest takeaway is that systems thinking isn't just some abstract concept, it's a call to action for all of us.
It's an invitation to change how we see the world, to question everything, to use that understanding of systems to make things better in our own lives and for everyone.
It's about realizing we are all connected, our actions have consequences, and we have the power to shape a better future.
So listeners, next time you had a problem, big or small, ask yourselves, what's the system at play here? What are the paradigms shaping this? And what can I do to change them, even just a little, for the better?
Because ultimately, changing the world starts with changing how we see it. And that's something we all have the power to do. Until next time, keep asking those tough questions and dive deep.